Today's topic is in part a reflection of the sign of the times. There is a tremendous amount of abuse of power that is now coming to the surface of our consciousness. It's been there really since the beginning of humanity in one way or another, but we are deepening our relationship and acknowledging it and our roles, each of us collectively in being a part of it on either side. So that has encouraged or inspired me to go deeper into this same dynamic within the construct of plant medicine ceremonies. Anybody who's been in this space of plant medicine for any length of time knows that there is rampant abuse of power. It's kind of a human thing. Power is powerful, and humans are still learning how to work with that, to put it lightly. In the context of ayahuasca ceremonies, Huachuma ceremonies, peyote, etc., there is, of course, rampant abuse. Everything from the unconscious projections and judgments that come from people who are not doing their own shadow work, all the way up to the incredible travesty and betrayal of sexual misconduct. I'm actually from a lineage myself where my teacher's teacher is deeply involved and accused of such things. And it's one of the reasons why I actually took a break from working with the medicine. I thought I was actually done because I've been so disenchanted and so brokenhearted about the abuse of power and how this space that is supposed to be healing is sometimes more traumatic. Understood, none of us are victims, but it hurts when you trust somebody to create a safe space for you and you become more vulnerable than you've ever been before, because that's what these medicines create in us. And then you have to then grapple with someone who's out of integrity and who is intentionally causing harm. So it's a lot. It's a big topic. I'm just going to cover some of the foundational elements that create this, but I welcome a deeper dialogue. First of all, the question I get asked a lot is, how would ayahuasca allow people who are facilitators to cause harm to other people? And the truth of it is that she does not stop us from being human. What she asks us is to become more conscious and accountable for our actions. But she will in no way prevent a shaman from using her for harm. She will hold him or her accountable for the karmic repercussions. That doesn't always happen immediately. It doesn't always happen in the way that we want it to. Karma is just like so beautiful that way, is it happens when it's supposed to. All of our karma comes back around in the fashion that will get our attention and help us to teach and grow when it is appropriate. And all of us with egoic agendas of wanting to see karma be instant, we get to learn the divinity of the universe and to trust that. So just know, ayahuasca, she doesn't condone abuse, but she doesn't stop it. And so it's not her doing to prevent us from being who we are, for having the journeys that we came here to have. So why does this abuse happen so frequently? Why is it so prominent? Well, part of that is because the role of a shaman is an almost impossible task. The level of responsibility that we hold for all of the people that we are doing ceremony with and for, it's mind-blowing. I can't even begin to articulate the pressure that that creates. It's beautiful, divine pressure, but it can drive someone mad, especially if they're not doing their own work of owning their shadow. It's exhausting. I can speak for myself that the responsibility that it takes to be both a messenger and a carrier of these medicines is that I don't get to hide from my shadow. I have to be very transparent around the stuff that sometimes I don't want anyone to know, because I know that's the only way that I am safe and that people who sit with me are safe, is that I own my humanness. I don't pretend to have it all figured out. And I don't accept pedestals. That here is a dynamic I've spoken about recently that happens a lot, especially with shamans in the jungle, is we go as participants and we have these marvelous, amazing experiences of healing, and we give them this pedestal out of a space of worship because we're so blown away by the healing and the expansion that we get to experience. And in their indigenous culture, they're not used to being revered. They're used to being respected, but a medicine man or woman in an indigenous culture, their role is no more important than the hunter or the mothers, etc. You know, they have a deeper sense of equality in that sense, and it's such an integral part of their tribal culture that they don't see it as a guru worship. So when we give people from any culture a pedestal, I know it's been offered to me many times, and it is extremely tempting to want to be seen as superhuman, but it's not honest. And I have given those so many times, pedestals, to my teachers, and there's only one way to go, falling right off, that I do my best not to receive them either. It's really, really important to remember that we're all just playing our roles, and none of us deserve the accolades. But we know a lot of people in this space who eat it up being the shaman, you know, it's a sexy role until you realize the degree to which it is so accountable for the responsibility physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually of every person that trusts us with their spiritual well-being, and physical, mental, and emotional for that matter. So the reality of it is that it's such a difficult job that, you know, I've heard the maestros in the jungle say that only 1 out of 20 people who answer the calling and go through apprenticeship actually have what it takes to stay for a lifetime in this role, because it's such a big game, and the level of integrity, etc. It's just a lot to take on. It sounds good on paper. In reality, it's very, very intense. So I also feel like I want to pull in the awareness too that many of us are afraid of our power, and so therefore we have a really shadowy relationship with it. What I mean by that is because we have a fear of doing harm, myself included, many of us, not everyone, we know that power is a risk, that if we step into our power, we risk getting it wrong, looking stupid, or unintentionally harming someone. But yet it's not okay for us to hold back and to not step into our power. So what do we do about that? What we do about that is we dedicate ourselves to this space of integrity, of owning our humanness, of calling ourselves out when we've been out of integrity, when we weren't in alignment with our hearts, with an action or a saying. Like, it's okay. We don't have to be perfect at all. We're humans. We're not gonna succeed at perfection, but we hold ourselves to this space of trying to attain it, and it creates guilt and shame and all kinds of shadowy things that actually incites us to do the thing that we don't want to do, which is to cause harm. So my medicine partner and I, we're doing our own solo work all the time before a cycle or in our regular lives, working with our medicines with people that we trust to hold space for us or for each other. We don't just, as ayahuasca calls it, do our work on the teacher's desk, meaning just do it in the ceremonies we're leading. That it wouldn't work, and don't trust anyone who's doing that. If they're not wholly dedicated to their own process of unraveling their shadow, their pain and suffering, then they're not safe, and something's going to go wrong or cause drama and conflict and pain. The last thing I want to leave everyone with is a message from Huachuma that I received many years ago that feels so relevant to this conversation of owning our power. Because we can see, not just in the medicine space, but right now we're in the midst of a revolution in America where some of us, myself included, have been playing small and therefore have played a role in other people's suffering and repression. So this fear of power, what do we do with that? Well, Huachuma had this incredible teaching for me. Many years ago, I was at a place called El Brujo in Peru that has a couple of temples from the Mochi tribe about 3,000 years ago, and in one of them they did human sacrifices for the sake of the greater good, and there's a long, amazing story around that of why they did it, but I had the honor of going into the room where these sacrifices occurred, and there's a fresco on the wall of this tribal guy with a axe, and it's called El Decapitator because they would cut off their heads and give the bodies to the water, which this is right on the beach. And I was so sickened by it. Like, the reality of what we do to each other, even if it's for a good cause. And I exited the room vomiting, and my amazing teacher, Howard, put his arm around me and he was like, "Sweetheart, it's just the dark side of heaven. It's still heaven. You have to look at it that way. It's just the dark side of it." And that gave me something to work with. I sat down with the medicine in me very strongly, crying. And he taught me this difference between power and empowerment. So power is something the ego seeks to be special, to be strong, to be validated. But empowerment is the experience we get to have when we are vessels for divinity. And that is an honest experience. The truth is, our egos aren't powerful. They're just these overlays that create a symbiotic relationship with consciousness because they allow us to know what separateness feels like so that we can consciously know what unity feels like. So don't get me wrong. I'm not bad-mouthing egos. They're fabulous. They're just not the part that's connected to the magic of co-creating with the universe. So empowerment, as Huachuma taught me, is the honor and blessing of knowing that I get to be a vessel, but I am not the one carrying the burden of creating the power. The power exists. Sorry about that. The power exists, and I get to experience it and do the work of being a clean vessel that can connect to this, but I don't get to stake claim to it. So I hope that helps, that we can right now as medicine people and as humans in our tribe band together and hold us in accountability for when we're coming from ignorance and shadow, but also to empower each other to co-create miracles with divinity. Any of us that work with plant medicine, we know that miracles are possible. We experience them all the time if we're lucky to get to sit with these plants. So I know that's true for the world at large too. But this abuse of power, this relationship that we each have with power, we all have to do the work of being in integrity with this and recognizing when we are wounded and therefore wanting the validation and the specialness and creating a relationship with power that is abusive. Thank you so much for listening. Please put your voices down below or go to my website, afterlife.coach, and send me a note if this is something you're passionate about. I just deeply appreciate your camaraderie and your tribal connection. I wish you all peace and beautiful, safe, enlightening journeys. Much love.